Now, in this session, we are talking about React components, that is ReactJS components. If you are seeing over here, the React components are two. One is the functional components, another is the class components. Before going to the actual topic over here, let me talk about what is a component. Normally, in the building blocks of React, it is one of the core building block of React. So what we are doing here is, what is the purpose of to create the component means to make the separate of the markup, means whatever we are writing the HTML, and the logic means script, we are going to using this component. So instead of separating the markup is one file and logic is another file, what we are doing here is we are making that React uses the components for this purpose. So instead of having a separate markup and separate logic, we can combine together markup and language logic and make it as a component. Now, how we are going to be creating the components is, we can create the components in two ways. One is class, another is the function. But let me talk about little more bit about the component of React. So in this Java, we have the functions, JavaScript. We are writing for a piece of code, right? So what is the difference of that writing the functions in JavaScript and writing the code of components in React means? In the React, we have the work with the isolations and it returns the HTML. Where in JavaScript, we can't work with isolation. We can need to not return the HTML part. And every application, whatever you are creating in React, it will be made up of piece of components, right? So each piece is called as a component. In another way, you have designing an UI, means user interface you are designing, right? Breaking down that UI into multiple individual pieces, that each piece is called as an component. Now each piece has work independently. And finally, we are merging all that components into a parent component and making finally as a final UI. Example, see this is one website. In this website, if you are closely look of this one, if you see then the top, it is a text field. Is a text field. It's a one component, and this is a menu bar where all this one. This is the entire menu bar. This is one component in this website, and in the left hand side there is a frame. This is one more frame. This is the entire frame is one component. Here there is another frame over here. This is also be called as one component. So see, this part is one component, this part is one component, this part is one component, this part is another component. So making individually it will work over here. It is for the first component here is for searching. The second component which is for the other stuff which is available in this website. The third component over here is again we required the in this same page what are the things it is available. There is a like table of content, and there is a fourth component where it is talking about the description of that particular each navigation or each link over there. So these are the four different components are working here, and all together we are combining this as a parent component. Nothing but it's a main component, and this main component finally, if you merge it, it will look like as a final GUI. But individually, if you see, first component is one UI, second component is one UI, third is one UI, fourth is another UI. This is the best example how we are working with the React.js. So as I said, we have two types of components in the React. That first one is the functional component. The functional component is similar to the JavaScript functions, how it will work out. Now see, already you know how to write the functions in React, right? So with the help of parenthesis followed by arrow function, right? So this is the name of the function we are mentioning. Inside that, we are returning some HTML code. Not only this, we can return some HTML code. So this is called as functional component. How we can be say functional component? We are using the same as the function concept in React. How to use the function concept is parenthesis and arrow operator. The second component is the class component. The class component little bit complex, not little bit complex, but not complex. Very easy also. A little bit of focus has to be required. A class component must be include extents of the React dot component, because you are making this as a inheriting to the React dot component. React dot component is the parent for all the components. Now you are adding your user defined component to that React component. So to access the classes which are available in React dot component, we must and should have to inherit that React dot component in our application. So to do that one, we are using extend keyword. Once you extend that React dot component, you are able to, means your component able to access the functions which are available in React dot components. So it also be requires a render method to, and also it returns the HTML code where like the function in the previous function component is returning HTML, right? In the class also it returns the HTML part. See the example how we are going to be declaring the class component over here. Class the user-defined component name, component demo component extends react.component. So once it is extended, all the functions which are belongs in the react.component will be accessible by demo component. So as I said, it requires the render. So render, it returns the HTML line of code. This is how we can do a simple example over here. Okay. So next, coming to the rendering components, like how to call a function with the help of the parenthesis, semicolon, we can call a function, right? In the similar fashion, how we can be rendering the components. So how we are rendering, already are aware, we have a render method, but how we can pass that render component into this render function. So to render a component, to initialize an element, a user-defined element, which is initialize an element with user-defined component and pass this element, like already you are aware the syntax of render, the first parameter is a element itself. We need to pass that first parameter of this user-defined component as the input for this render function. Or else, instead of user-defined component, directly whatever you are writing the user-defined component, directly that component we can pass as a parameter for the render method. See the example. Render component can be passed as like this: element name equal to, this is the component name, user-defined component name, ends with this. This is the element which you are mentioning. So in the Angular bracket, use the last slash. Here it has to be use the hash over here. See one example so that you can understood very clearly. So this is a functional component. So in the functional component, what we are doing, we are calling a function welcome. So this is a functional component. So welcome. So you can know by using this one, it's a functional component, parenthesis and arrow mark. I'm just returning here one hello world h1 element. Now in the render, we are directly passing that as the welcome. Means this is a welcome. What is the name of the functional component? Welcome. Welcome is a functional component slash. This is how we can be mentioned. Previously, what we had done in the JSX, we are just mentioning that element name, like name or ELE, like this we are mentioning, right? So instead of that, directly we are mentioning that component itself. So how it will be called? Once the render has called this welcome, it will goes to this function, it will execute this function, and it returns something over here. It returns something hello world here. It will return back over here. It will come the output as hello world. So this hello world will be displayed in the HTML index.html in the place of ID. What is ID we are using is root. So in the place of that, it is going to be using that output. Okay. So in this ReactJS components, what we have learned, what is the component and what is the difference between the functions and the components in this one is the best example for how we need to understood the ReactJS. Followed by two types of components we have: functional components, which is defined like in the functions, JavaScript function, and another is the class component. To define the class component, we need to must and should extend the render.component. Also, we need to require a render method. So with the help of that, this is one example. And how to rendering the components means in the Angular brackets, component name followed by space followed by slash. So this is one example for this one. So that's about the React components over here. Okay.